Welcome to the episode of Assess and Caress on Jay Leno's Garage. The cars today are brought to you by me, two of them here, and of course this singer from the famous Audrain Museum in Newport, Rhode Island. They have a fabulous collection. It was brought by reliable carriers. They brought it all the way across the country and they take it all the way back, which is pretty cool. With us today, also from the Audrain, Mr. Donald Osborne. Donald is our appraiser extraordinaire. He will tell us which car has increased the most in value in the last 5 years. All right. Donald, what do we have today?
We've got three cars which represent a theme which I don't normally talk about because, as you know, I spend my life valuing cars, but what their value is not as important to me as what makes them interesting or not so interesting.
Right.
But the theme here is what pays you back. So to get this comparison, we have a 1991 Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer. Mm-hmm. We have a 1963 Porsche 356C Carrera 2 and a 2004 Porsche Carrera GT. So let's start with the car we're standing right next to right now, this Carrera 2.
Right, this is a 1963 4Cam. This is one of my favorite cars. As a young man, I was never a big Porsche fan, only because as a kid you're thinking about horsepower and torque. And Porsches were like 90 horsepower and they were $4,000 to $5,000. Corvettes were literally hundreds of horsepower, 300, 350, 360, for less money than I never understood why you just didn't go with the biggest, fastest car as opposed to the one with the most finesse, as they say. This is one of the most satisfying cars to drive that you can imagine. It's got the 4Cam engine, which you can keep it at $7 grand all day long. You get down the highway, you put your foot down, you're doing 110, 115, and it just hums, it just stays there. It's meant to spin quickly. It's not an engine that likes to idle. And it's an improvement on the Herth, am I pronouncing that right?
Herth, yes.
Yeah. The original 4Cams were a bit finicky. You couldn't let them idle because
the roller bearings.
The roller bearing cam. Whereas this has got plain bearings. You can drive it, you can change the oil, you can do all the things yourself. Wonderful, wonderful car.
And what's amazing about the Carrera 2 to me, I never understood for years why people build outlaw 356s. And I thought, 356 I like for its balance. It's not a very quick car, but you can drive them fast. And I should say, I said that exactly backwards. It's not a very fast car, but you can drive them quickly.
Right.
And then I drove a Carrera 2 for the first time, and I thought, wow, this is the kind of performance that I really wanted in this car. The fact that this chassis, which dates from 1948, could actually handle this kind of power, which it didn't get for the road until 1962, is absolutely astonishing. And it also exemplifies for me what Porsche was all about. I mean, the 4Cam engine obviously came from the racing Porsches. And so to have a race engine for the street, there's a great period ad for this car that shows the Carrera 2 waiting at a grade crossing, a railroad grade crossing. And that this is a race car you could drive to work.
Right.
I thought that was absolutely amazing. And we chatted before we started rolling about the fact that you've owned this car for a good deal of time. And there was a time when people were really afraid of these cars, as you mentioned about the engines. And a lot of these cars had their 4Cam engines taken out and standard pushrod engines put in. And because people thought, oh, you can't deal with those engines.
Well, they also did it because with modern technology, you could actually get more horsepower out of the pushrod engine than you could the 4Cam at the time. So, and from a logical standpoint, that seems like the way to go, easier maintenance and all that kind of thing. Because the early 4Cams, you couldn't sit at a light idling. It was, oh, gee, you had to keep those revs up all the time.
Well, again, thinking about the fact it's derived from a race car engine, so race cars generally don't idle. And what people seldom know is the fact that you know quite well that my first car was a Corvair. My second car was almost a 356B because I love this shape all the time. I've always loved that sort of late 1930s aerodynamic shape, and this is very much the successor to that. And it's one of the reasons why these cars are what they are is because they are also very slippery aerodynamically, not compared to a superly tuned modern car today.
Right.
But they enable the car to really maximize what you got from the power that was available.
It's interesting because Porsche is always, in most races, the least powerful car, but the fastest. So in a sense, the slowest car wins the race all the time. I remember our friend Jason over at Haggerty has a wonderful video. The Porsche, the 350R Shelby, and another car. And the Porsche was down 100 horsepower on everything else, and yet it was the fastest around the track, but not the fastest. Yeah.
Yeah, I love watching this old film of SCCA racing in the 1950s, and you'll see race groups that have 356s and Mercedes gull wings, and you'll see the gull wings pull away on the straights, and then they have to get to the end of the straight, they brake, the 356s catch up, pass them in a corner, and accelerate away until the gull wing repeats the process. Right. Also, what's wonderful about this car is that it's got those terrific period racing seats in it, which are amazing too, because modern racing seats, and we'll see something in the other two cars we're looking at today, have a totally different concept of what is needed to hold you in. And I think these seats are the perfect blend.
Yeah, they
They're
really
just
are.
supportive enough without grabbing you.
The reason they didn't sell that many of these were, it looked exactly like, the same reason the original ZR1 Corvette. It was twice the price, and all you got was a different engine. I mean, nowadays we get the value of that, but at the time you go, boy, they both look the same. Why is this one $8,000, that one's $4,500? Well, this has the 4Cam in it. Well, just get this one, you know. And that was, for most people, that was too much money for too little.
Yeah, it also, frankly, speaks to an age then and even today where there are certain cars that are sort of designed for the people who know.
Right.
Your satisfaction is knowing what you have and not necessarily it being recognized by the people that see it drive down the street.
The great thrill of this car is enjoying the tack sweep across. It's just, you can go down the road, put your foot in it, you can look at the tack, and it's, you know, modern cars, hey, I'm in jail. Wait, what happened? I didn't even, you know, you don't even realize, it all happens so quickly. Whereas this, it's just a steady stream of torque. It just pulls it, and you see it sweep across, and when it hits 72, you shift. It's just a wonderful car to drive.
Let's take a look at the engine.
As you can see, we made some modification. We put Webers on it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's completely stock. It seems to like the Weber carburetors. There's your dry sump system right here. Yeah.
It's one of those things as well that if you don't know what you're looking for or looking at, you say, well, how does it look that much different than a standard pushrod engine? But you know, when you see the ends of the engine cover, and these engines are really glorious when they're on the bench being rebuilt. It's just absolutely amazing the way they go together. It's quite spectacular. And so the performance that the Carrera 2 delivers in the 356 shell was the inspiration, in many ways, for the car we're going to look at next, which is the Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer. So this is a car that you're very familiar with.
Right.
The Singer is a fascinating idea, taking a Porsche 964, which is one of the most plentiful and well-built of the 911 variants, from the 1980s, early 90s, and looking at it in a different way, lending it a sort of a retro look for the earliest 911s, but updating the mechanicals in a way that is thoroughly modern. And what I really admire about the early cars which Singer built for their customers was that they were very well balanced cars. This is not one of these super hot rods with 500, 600 horsepower, 390 horsepower in a really slightly lightened shell. They use carbon fiber for fenders and to get that look. And it's got the look of an RS. And this particular one, which is called the Mountain View Commission, each of them are named after the original owners who commissioned them, is also finished in a really interesting color scheme. This is a very special color called Downton Blue.
Right.
And with the orange letters, it also recalls, although not copying, that famous Gulf livery in our minds.
Well, I have to admit, I don't really see the value to me in custom paints and whatnot. I like the performance of a car. You know, like a lot of times you can go to manufacturers, like with the new GTD Mustang, and you can request a color, and to pay an extra $30,000 or $50,000 for a color change, which is not that different as opposed to a performance change, it doesn't really interest me. Like if I was having one of these car commissioned, I would go with just a stock color and make all the modifications in engine, suspension, and braking. You know, getting specific leather and all that kind. I mean, it's all very nice, but it just seems like Jim Crackery, as I call it. It just seems like you're just gilding the lily. So
You mean you wouldn't take the time to make sure that the colors in your bow tie and the patterns coordinate with the shirt in a way that also enhances the car? Yes, indeed. The case is thoroughly and completely rested.
Yes.
One of the things that I actually really also love about this car and about the Singer treatment is that I am, as you well know, an absolute sucker for quilted leather.
Right.
And they have the braided leather on the seats, on the door panels, on the dashboard, and quilted leather in the engine compartment. I mean,
Right.
it's total excess, which
Yeah.
I love. I mean,
Right.
it's the idea, if you're going to build something for yourself, why not make it a total personal expression? So I get what the idea behind building one of these is. Is it necessary for the performance? No, but it's nice.
I know what you mean. You know, growing up in New England in a diet of Silas Marner and Ethan Frome, and life is tough, and then you die. It just seems like an excess. I have to have a reason to do something. Like to me, if you said, I need you to go down to San Diego and look at this car, I would love to take a drive. Just to go to take a drive. No, I need a reason to. I feel I always have to justify what I do. And leather in the engine compartment doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems like throwing silver dollars in the ocean. You know, it's just sort of see how many you can chuck before the other guy gives up.
Well, as Marilyn Monroe so beautifully stated in the wonderful film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, that the fact that her fiancé was a millionaire was just an added bonus because he was marrying her because she was pretty.
Right.
So why not marry him because he's rich? So why not have performance and quilted leather?
Well, that's right. I mean, yeah, I get it, but I mean, asking me if I would do it, no, I probably wouldn't. As much as I like it.
They could probably do a variant with denim and chambray in the engine compartment.
Well, now that you say that, that sounds fantastic.
Exactly. But also looking inside, we were talking about the racing seats in the Carrera 2. You'll see, obviously, this is the next generation of type of racing seat. It's much more aggressive. In fact, these were custom made for this commission, and the fellow who commissioned the car was someone who was very, very tall. And so when the current owner purchased the car, he actually had the seats replaced with seats that were actually lower and better formed for him. And you know, that's the kind of thing that you can do on a car like this, is you do that sort of thing. And also, I admire the level of detail. Even the glass underneath the vent in the engine deck lid.
Yeah.
And actually, let's take a look at the engine. As you said before, 390 horsepower, engine built by the noted engine builder Ed Pink for Singer. And again, it's a really beautifully presented package. And I also like, again, the balance of the car. It's really well balanced, and having driven this car, it still feels like the base car from which it came, but just sort of amped up a notch. Much like the Carrera 2 is a 356C up a notch.
Well, you know, this is kind of why Gordon Murray is still my favorite builder, designer. He builds race cars to win races and road cars to do exactly what they do. He never gets them confused. His new T50, which is the dream car for all of it.
I like the T33 better.
I probably would if they built that one first. But, you know, you build the Ultimate and they go, okay, here's one. Oh, it's not quite. Oh, no. You know, it's like coming out with a lower horsepower model. But he never really talks about horsepower. It's all about driving experience. And there's nothing on his cars that is, quote, Jim Crackery. It doesn't, there's nothing really, everything has a purpose. It's lightweight, it's extreme, but it's a road car, it's not a race car. So consequently, you get all the pleasure. It's extremely comfortable, but you get the racing feel and sensation. You know, sometimes I've driven some modern McLarens, you know, the Senna, and they're such hardcore. You're on the street all the time getting kidney punched like this, you know, and you go, unless you're a race car driver, the experience for the average person is probably a bit too much, you know.
And Gordon Murray also has a great feel for aesthetics as well. So there's function and great beauty, I think, in the car. All the components of it is just absolutely remarkable.
Well, let's move over to our last car.
We'll move on to our last car, which is certainly an ultimate statement of performance for the road. Many people would consider this the absolute ultimate in the analog Porsche, and certainly probably one of the most capable and remarkable road cars Porsche has ever made.
And you know, it's 603 horsepower, which seems like nothing today. But at the time, it was pretty incredible. Again, they've always been about a total package. So 603 horsepower was hefty, but it wasn't crazy at the time.
End of the world. And I was present at the Quail Lodge when they unveiled the concept of this car, and also I think they did a great job from concept to street model, almost no changes at all in terms of the aesthetic of the car. And the design is also pretty wonderful because it's very futuristic, but also quite practical. You can see that it's actually a mechanical object.
Yeah, it's awful close to the ground. This has the lift kit on it. Normally when you drove it would go when you scrape. With the lift kit it goes so you scrape it a little less, but yeah. I mean, going into a gas station, you go, oh, you have to go side.
Angle.
Where are you going? What are you doing? People behind you beep. Go forward. There's a little hump. What? A little hump in the, you know, it does drive you a little crazy.
And one of the other things which I love about the Carrera GT is the fact that it is the very epitome of never say die. The V10 engine that's in this car was designed for Formula One originally, and then that didn't work, and so they designed it for a long-distance racer. They didn't use it for that, and so this engine sort of was put on the shelf, taken off the shelf, put on the shelf, taken off the shelf, and finally came to life in this incredible street
next
car.
to Gordon's 12,000 RPM T50, this is the best-sounding automobile engine. Just putting your foot into this thing, it really does just howl.
It has that wonderful blend. You know, you often talk about the blend of the feminine and the masculine design. This has that wonderful blend of the modern and the old. You know, it's all about the engine, and yet it's in this thoroughly modern package. Let's take a look at the engine.
Yeah, it's a beautiful engine compartment. And you know, this car's got quite a few miles on it, but see, it remains clean.
How many miles do you have on it?
About 10,000. That's not crazy.
Excuse me, 1 second.
Well, thank you. But
well done. I mean, these cars are meant to be driven.
You know, you can go up into the hills around Los Angeles. It's the most satisfying car to drive. And as I said, the best sounding car. It's entertaining on a lot of levels, and that's what's fun. It's not just going fast. It's the sound and the feel. It really is a terrific car to drive.
And we often talk, when we look at the engine compartments, especially, again, as engines are now being uncovered once again, this is wonderful because you can actually see that it's an engine. You also see the structure of the car, which I think is so incredibly neat as well. These great carbon fiber arms, the suspension. It's absolutely fantastic. And of course, there is the fact that much like the early 911s, these were very tricky to handle at the limit. But that is even apparently not as much of a problem as they were when they were new, because the rubber has improved since 2005.
Rubber has improved, yeah. I mean, you have to know how to drive it. I watched this car get beat up. Is it a murder vehicle? You know, all this kind of nonsense. No, you're driving on 8, 9-year-old tires. You're going over the Bosdots. Those are those reflectors they have in the roads here in California, where you go thump, 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 thump. You know, if you get off to the side, you can feed yourself. Yeah, and it was sadly just being driven in a non-responsible manner, and that was, I think, the real cause of that tragic accident.
And the whole idea of respecting the car and its performance and sort of knowing what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, there are very few people that can drive these cars at their limit. You know, not your limit, but the car's limit, you know. I mean, I am not an athlete, and race car drivers are athletes with lightning reflexes, and the average owner does not have those. I know I don't. You know, I get on the track, you know, and I remember Sterling Moss said he retired because after his accidents, he was 1/10 of a second slower around the track, and you could never get that 1/10 back. And I always thought, 1/10 of a second? I mean, really? But that's what it was. He just something changed, and he just said, you know, that's it. And you realize to work on that margin of error is pretty amazing, yeah.
And the fact that Porsche brought a car like this to the street, I think, is an amazing accomplishment. And many people say we'll never see the likes of this car again. I don't like to say never, because every time there's the last something, another one comes out. But,
exactly.
You know, we never know, but this certainly represents the absolute pinnacle of the thinking
when you
that
realize
went into a car like this.
After this car, the next supercar was the 918. That set a record at Nürburgring. Now the 911, just your regular high-performance 911, beat the 918, by a substantial margin.
So now let's sum up what these three cars have shown in the marketplace in the last 5 years and their percentage of appreciation in that time. We've got the 2004 Porsche Carrera GT, there's 1963 Porsche 356C Carrera 2, and the 1991 Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer. Your thoughts?
Well, I think this will be somewhat controversial, and it might be outside the 5-year. Here's the way I see it.
You have to follow the rules.
I would put this at number 3, and you say why? Well, because you're only original once, and when you take a Porsche and you modify it, like this was best in class, just unbelievable perfection. Unfortunately, you have a lot of people getting into this game, including Porsche itself. You have Ruff, you have Gunther, you have all these European companies doing reimagined Porsches. And then eventually, people will tire of this and go, what was it like originally? Before you modify it, what was that? They want to get back to that original feel. To me, the best example would be the Carrera GT. That car was $450,000 in 2004. I know someone that bought 2 of them, one to kind of keep and the other one to drive. And then he was just driving it, and he said, I'm not going to drive it, let me sell it. And he sold it for the mid 330, thought it was, because they were down to 2.25 at one point. Okay.
New cars depreciate.
Now they're over $2 million. So that would, to me, that would be my number 1 choice. The Singer might go up in the next 3 or 4 years, but I think as more people get into the game and more Singers are produced and whatever, the real Porsche, what's the word, a Conoscenti? How do you say that?
Conoscenti.
Conoscenti, yeah. Okay.
Aficionado.
Yeah, they will go back to, where's the original one? I want exactly is what, because you have cars now like Tesla with 1,000 horsepower. You have Challenge with the 170D model. Suddenly horsepower and speed is not the criteria anymore, because everything is fast now. I mean, just any car you get is pretty quick. So I would go Carrera GT as the best one. This is the second one. And this one third. But I might be way off base. I think in the last 5 years, these do go for a pretty price, but I'm not sure that will continue.
Well, here's how it shakes out.
All right.
5 years ago, you could have gotten a Carrera 2 like this one for about $750,000. Today, it would cost you about $950,000, so a substantial increase in value. A Carrera GT 5 years ago would be about $1 million, and certainly today you couldn't touch one with a good service history for less than $1.75 million. And the 911 reimagined by Singer, 5 years ago, that would have cost you about $825,000, and today $1.2 million. So you got the leader correct. The winner of the appreciation sweepstakes is the Carrera GT.
Okay.
And then second would be the Singer, and then third, the Carrera 2.
But that's probably true. If we were doing 10 years into the future, I would say it would be the other way around. Because this will continue to go up in value, because it will always be exactly what it was. When you pick up the old magazines, you can recreate what that driver was talking about, what he felt about it. You can always modify a Porsche. And this is not, I mean, these are amazing cars. I'm not slamming it. I'm just saying, but you can make more of these. You can't make more of these. This one you could recreate for pretty close to the same price. This one you can't. So you will always pay more for originality.
I think it's also worth noting that as we have done these, it is relatively rare that the most valuable car has been the winner in the appreciation sweepstakes, which also speaks quite highly to the Carrera GT and what it means today to the
But
market.
most importantly, I was right.